What's up, my foodie family? I hope you're all eating well. Welcome back to the channel. We're having another episode of turning positives into negatives. And, we're going to have another hard talk, like always. We're going to talk addiction. And the reason I even want to talk addiction is because, in my opinion, I think there's a lot of people suffering from addiction for one reason or another. And, a lot of times addiction doesn't have to look like an addict. Person doesn't have to look stressed out. They don't have to look, with a hard face or, missing teeth, or somebody can be, polished up and down and, trimmed up everything and still be an addict somehow. You know what I mean? So I think people are scared to talk about addiction because they think, oh man, I'm an addict. Everybody's going, if I talk about, drugs, everybody's going to say I'm an addict. You know what I mean? And there might not be something wrong with that. I mean, of course, you want to not be an addict with anything bad, you know what I mean, or overuse anything, even if it's good. You don't want to be an addict with that either. But knowing that you have an addiction, that you have a problem, man, they say that's the first step to, stopping. You know what I'm saying? You have to know you have the problem to be able to address the problem. And everybody wants to hide that one, which is cool. I understand, you know what I mean. Nobody wants everyone else to know that they're suffering with an addiction of something, and then, like I said, people are going to gain a bad perception of you and think, oh, that person's an addict. Don't go around that person; you might become an addict. Oh, that person, they ain't got no money. That's because they spend it all on drugs, or you know what I'm saying? Like, so just because I might have an addiction with something doesn't mean all my money goes to that. When I hear addiction, I think that there's some type of problem, and that the substances or drugs or the alcohol or whatever is helping somebody cope with that problem. You know what I mean? Whatever the problem may be. At least that's how I seen it in my eyes. And then it's like, I know I'm not an expert. I'm not an addiction expert. Even though I make these uh, videos, that doesn't mean I'm an expert on everything I talk about. What I'm doing is telling people what I went through, why I went through it, and how I dealt with it or how I'm dealing with it. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that I'm an expert in the sense that I've studied it and I went to school for it and, like I'm a counselor and all this and that. Nah, man. It's just, I've been through situations where I've been an addict. I've seen other people be an addict. And I don't think that's something we should shun and point the finger at and talk down on. You know what I mean? Like, that's something we need to have a conversation about. Like, why is this happening to people? Why are people choosing to succumb to addictions? And I think it's several different reasons. At least in my opinion, there's several different reasons. There may be a book definition or whatever, but man, addiction, in my opinion, is when someone is hurting. Someone has a problem. For me, when I mainly been, having alcohol problems. I will over drink. Drink when I'm sad, drink when I'm happy, drink when I'm confused, and then I would drink to pass out, drink till I go to sleep. You know what I mean? And I have dabbled. I've smoked a lot of weed also. Some places weed is legal, some places it's not. You know what I mean? But it's a drug in some places, and it's a drug, and it's not a drug in other places. So, and it's like I never really, yeah, different times when I'm like, oh man, I need to smoke, but it's like I ain't never sold anything personal for a weed addiction. I've never sold anything personal for an alcohol addiction. I did have an addiction that I was selling stuff for, and I had that addiction for 2 years, and I did my best to hide it from people. And I don't know if maybe I did hide it from people, maybe I didn't. Maybe people knew about it, maybe they didn't. But I just felt like a fool because that certain substance, man, I went my whole life without touching it at all. And then I got into a place where I felt like I just didn't care no more. I wanted to die. And I was hoping that substance I was abusing was going to kill me. You know what I mean? So the reasons I succumbed to addiction is for several reasons, man. It's grief, losing people, whether it's to death, to jail, or people just leaving your life, whether it's your fault or their fault. Those things can hurt really bad, especially if it's somebody you love or you wanted to love, and you feel like you can do nothing. It's like there's not a lot you can do about people dying and going to jail. You know what I mean? But it's like you wish that you would have been able to do these things with those people who died or went to jail. You wish you still had time with them. You wish that there's just a lot of stuff you could have did and you didn't do. You procrastinated and you never really got to show that person how much you loved them, or you never really got to spend the time you wanted to spend with them. And then, but when somebody leaves your life, it's either because there was you guys didn't mesh, the goals weren't the same, or somebody was a jerk. You know what I mean? And a lot of times that's being me. I can admit that I have been a jerk several times over and over again. You know what I mean? And it's I feel like it's hard for me to change that. Now I feel like I've been doing everything possible, getting knowledge, trying to apply the knowledge, but it's like I'm having a hard time with that. I've been having a hard time with that on how I express myself to people. You know what I mean? Like just being completely ignorant. You know what I mean? When I feel like somebody is deceiving me, or you know what I mean, I just don't approach the situation the right way. So grief, losing loved ones, people passing away, people going to prison, you know what I mean, people walking out your life, that's one reason. And then loneliness, being at home by yourself at the end of the night, and it's just you, and you have no one to talk to, you have no one to be there for you. And a lot of times that comes from the first one, from how I acted with people. But hey, I'm learning every day. I'm not perfect. You know what I'm saying? I'm a work in progress. I'm trying my best. I know I've said before. It's like when I was coming up, in the society, a lot of people dealt with their problems by screaming and yelling at each other and fighting. And that's something that I've been trying to shake for a long time, but it's difficult, and I'm doing my best, but I'm not there yet. You know what I mean? So that brought me to being lonely, being by myself, not interacting with people correctly. You know what I mean? So, and then being lonely ain't a bad thing always. Everybody needs a long time. But the thing about it is, when you lonely every night for a couple years, you know what I mean, it starts to eat you up. Well, it started to eat me up. Then there's also being in a situation where I feel like I can't fix. Like I've tried to fix it. I've tried to need more money. It's hard to just it's hard to just get a raise. You know what I mean? Like you gotta wait. You know what I mean? It's hard to just get promoted. So it's like I felt like I did everything I could to get promoted or to get a raise. I felt like I did everything I could to get a different high paying job, and then it still didn't work. I still wasn't having the money that I thought I should have, or I didn't have the position that I thought I should have. So it's like I feel like I'm doing the things that I need to, but it's not working. So it's just like, what am I supposed to do? Like, how can I go forward? What else do I do now? And then working jobs around people that I do not like. You know what I mean? Like that eats me up so bad, and I'm sure it eats up other people. And this is why I'm having this talk. It's like, so having grief, being lonely, not feeling like I can change my situation, working with people I don't like. You know what I'm saying? I never felt like I got to be the father I wanted to be. I never felt like I got as much time as I did, as I wanted to get. You know what I mean? And just being sad about the fact that I can't go back and change that. And then there was times whenever I did have my kids, when, like I said before, I know I did my best to always be there for them, but I wasn't always the best, like attitude wise. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I was there for them, but I wasn't always, the smiling face that they needed to see. You know what I mean? And that's just because like I'm in crazy situations, man, and I feel like I need more money, and so I'm taking that out on everybody. I'm lonely, and I'm taking that out on everybody. I'm grieving, and I'm taking that out on everybody. And I'm working these jobs with these people who are just stressing me out all day long. And then so I go from working at a job where I'm stressed out about not having the money I want, and also about working around people that I don't like. Then I go home to a house where I grieve because I'm lonely. Well, I grieve and I'm lonely, and I feel like I can't change my situation. You know what I'm saying? Like I want a bigger house, living in a small apartment, but I can't afford a bigger house. What am I supposed to do? Oh, let me get a new job. Oh, that didn't work. Let me get a raise. Oh, it's hard to get that raise. So all these different things I'm doing, and it just feel like life is just beating me down. You know what I mean? And then On top of life beating me down, I was beating myself down too. That's why I made the video about self-sabotage. That's me. I self-sabotage a lot of my life. Self-sabotage is another thing that can lead to addiction. You know what I mean? And then then being, like I said earlier, just coming from a past where I felt like wasn't the best. I felt like, I would have wanted it to be better, but of course everybody wants their past to be better, but it wasn't. And then it's like I beat myself up about the past, who I used to be, where I came from, and seeing people fight and scream and yell at each other, and then me screaming and yelling and fighting with each other, with other people. So I got to a point, man, where I felt like because of all those things, the grief, the loneliness, the not being able to change my situation, working a job that's not paying me enough money, working around people who I don't like, fighting for more time with my kids but not getting it. And then when I do get time with my kids, I'm not necessarily in the best mood, attitude wise, you know what I mean? So I just found myself, remembering how, the alcohol and the weed made me feel. And then it got to a point where it's like the alcohol and the weed wasn't enough. And then I know I was living around people at a certain time, and I seen them partying a lot, and they looked very happy, and I wanted to be happy like that. And then at first it just started off just partying. We was just partying, that's it. And then I felt so good partying that I ain't want to let it go. I just wanted to stay inside of that feeling. You know what I mean? Everywhere I went, I was just like, I felt like I was in a bad situation. You know what I mean? I felt like life was just kicking me around. And I was also making bad decisions, you know what I mean? So I just felt like, man, if life was going to be messed up like this, I just party as much as possible. And then because I started partying so much, I started to get sad because I'm like, Chris, what are you doing, man? This ain't you. And then the more sad I got, I just felt like, man, I shouldn't even be here. Nobody likes me. No, kids don't like me. Coworkers don't like me. You know what I mean? Like, family wasn't feeling me at the time. They still don't feel me now. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, I was trying to talk to people. I was trying to tell people what was going on. And everybody's like, Chris, just be strong. Just be strong and go through it. Just be strong. Everybody goes through stuff. I go through stuff. They went through stuff. Everybody has had some type of addiction before. Just stop doing it. You know what I mean? But I'm like, I don't like when people tell me just to be strong. You know what I mean? Because look, I said this before too. I can be strong-minded, very strong-minded, with no plan to fix my situation. So what is being strong-minded going to do for me? You know what I'm saying? If I'm continuously going through the same thing over and over and over, it's not about being strong-minded. It's about having some type of plan that's going to get you out of there. If you're strong-minded and you have a plan, that's a double boost, man. Good. You know what I mean? But just being strong-minded doesn't work if you have no plan. You're just going to keep getting beat up and getting back up and getting beat up and getting back up. But you're going to be in the same spot. Jim Rohn had this saying, I might not get it right. And he was like, if you find that something comes out the sky and starts hitting you over the head, you might be upset about it. He was like, but just standing there doing nothing isn't going to stop it from falling out the sky, hitting you over the head. He's like, if you want it to stop, you got to move. So don't get mad if the thing is hitting you over the head and you didn't want it to and you're wondering why. You need to move. So the plan is to move, all right, when you're getting hit over the head. You don't just stand there and wonder what's going on. The plan is to move. So if you don't have a plan to move, being strong-minded doesn't mean anything. So I tried to tell people that I had problems, but everybody has problems. Everybody has stuff going on in their life. So this is another reason why I have these conversations, because it's like, don't think you're the only one going through something. Everyone is going through something. Don't think you're the only one who's had an addiction before. A lot of people have had addictions before, but what's the plan? What's the plan? How are you going to stop it? How are you going to get out of it? Because I did a lot of dumb things when those 2 years I was abusing that substance I was abusing. I made a lot of really dumb decisions, really stupid stuff. And I was hoping I was going to die so I wouldn't have to deal with it. You know what I'm saying? I didn't die. So I still had to deal with all that stuff that I did. You know what I mean? So what if you are using your addiction because you want to get off this earth? Okay? What if the addiction doesn't take you off the earth? Now you have to deal with everything you did while you was addicted. You know what I mean? So it's like, and it was hard for me to get back to being right. You know what I mean? And stop abusing that substance I was abusing. And eventually I was able to stop that substance, and it was like through motivational videos, writing goals down and writing a plan to achieve those goals every day, like doing something to get closer to that goal every day. All right, so that gave me a new lease on life. Listening to motivational videos gave me a new lease on life. Uh, you know, Bike riding, man, riding bikes, taking my kids to the park, playing basketball with them, or just going to the park myself, and just shooting some hoops. Like, man, that made me feel better. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what it was. And then like gardening, I've always, had plants and flowers and, herbs and stuff like that. So, just gardening. I'm from Ohio, so it's kind of hard to garden, in the wintertime, but in the summertime, garden, keep house plants, read books, you know what I mean? Staying away from people that may have an addiction, or they just like to party. Stay away from the party people, you know what I mean? And a lot of crying, man, a lot of crying. Like the crying helped me get that stuff out, man. And also changing my diet, eating different foods, uh, and then doing my best to be grateful for everything that I had, which I'm still having a hard time with. I'm doing better. But it's difficult to always be grateful when you feel like there's things that you should have, or you want to have, or you feel like life beats you up, and the things that you have aren't necessarily the things that you want. But I try my best to be grateful for. I do my best to be grateful for as much as I can. Like a doorknob. Like how much more difficult would life be if we didn't have doorknobs? Or a cup. How much more difficult would life be if we didn't have cups to drink out of? You know what I mean? Or a couch. Think about how much more difficult life would be if you didn't have a couch or a bed or a rug, or a refrigerator, you know what I mean, or air conditioning, you know what I mean? Like, I do my best to be thankful for all of those things, because those are things we take for granted every single day. But if we didn't have them, life would be so much different. And I still struggle with it. Some days I'm very grateful, and some days I'm not. Some days I'm positive and I'm upbeat, and some days I'm pessimistic, man. I'm a human being. I'm doing my best to turn my negatives into positives, all right? But it's not always gonna be a good day. I don't always have good days. I do my best to not abuse substances because my days are going bad. You know what I mean? Or just to feel good. Like, man, I think sobriety, being sober sucks sometimes, man. And I'm like, I don't want to be sober. I don't like the way it feels sometimes. So that's when, I pick up a bottle. And that's been my biggest abuser. The weed, I don't really partake too much no more. You know what I mean? The other substances, I don't partake in those at all. But the alcohol, man, I think the alcohol is, I've been having a hard time with that one. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know. Some days I don't want it. And then some days, like, I just can't stop drinking. I drink all day long. You know what I mean? And I'm being honest, this is real life. We need to stop having these, baby talks, and, have real talks. You know what I mean? And hey, even I get mad off real talks. I know my daughter told me the other day, she told me how she felt about me, and she said, I'm being realistic. I'm having a real talk with you. And I got mad. I did. I got mad. But those are the talks I want to have. I'm glad she told me. I'm glad she finally told me how she felt. It hurt. It did. It hurt. But that also came from all those BS decisions that I've been making. You know what I mean? Like, I don't always make the best decisions. I'm not a perfect person. I'm doing my best to get through life just like everyone else. But the biggest thing I can do is keep my goals, work on my goals, try to do my best to be as creative as possible, and express myself, take anything that's in my brain, take it out and make it real. You know what I mean? And then that's how I want to express myself now, is through the things that I create, instead of like negativity. You know what I mean? But hey, it's a work in progress, and I'm doing my best. I still, garden as much as possible, or plant flowers and keep flowers around me as much as possible. Do deep breathing techniques and deep breathing routines, because they're supposed to be able to, help calm your nervous system, and help your breathing. Like, if you do get into a situation where you're starting to get upset, you don't have these short, fast breaths. You can still woosah, and breathe easily. And that can help stop you from being angry. That can help stop you from being mad. Or drinking as much water as possible, which is supposed to help calm you down also. And, exercising as much as possible. Try to do my best to stay on my diet. Still riding bikes. you know, I need to get back to playing basketball. I'm no good at basketball, but I do think it's a great activity to just like, you know, exert energy and it just like it takes your mind off of life. You know what I mean? I mean, any sport can, any hobby, whatever. But for me, I found even though I've never been good at basketball ever, for some reason shooting hoops just takes my because I suck at it and I know I do. And when I go out there, I'm actually trying to get better. I'm actually trying to make it, and I forget about everything else while I'm trying to shoot the hoops. But just try to keep myself as active as possible. When I'm not active, when I have those, I have that idle time. That's when it hurts. It hurts a lot. It hurts a lot, and I'll be ready to drink, drink, drink. But I'm working through it. Definitely going to get into AA. I have been talking about going to AA, but I keep putting it off. You know what I mean? But I just need to go ahead and go. And that's just talking to people about what's going on. It's a very freeing. You know what I mean? That's why being lonely, it sucks because you have nobody to talk to. So you just want to get something off your mind and you can't. That's why I was writing all that poetry before. You know what I mean? Because that's how I would get things off my mind. I would write to the paper. I would talk to the paper because I had no one else to talk to. So poetry, writing, books, you know what I mean? Reading books, writing books, keeping yourself active, the gardening, motivational videos, Les Brown, Earl Nightingale, Jim Rohn, there's even some newer people too. I like the older guys, the older people. I like the messages they have. But there's some newer people in there too. And, you know, and stand on your goals. You write those goals down, write something you're going to do to take one step toward those goals every day, and then just stay active. And then eventually, over time, you start accomplishing those goals. And that doesn't make you feel all the way better. You're still going to have those bad days, all right? But the goal is to have more good days than bad. And you have more good days by planning your days out, by having goals, by working on your goals every single day, by reading motivational videos, expressing yourself through your hobby, through an activity, or through writing or poetry or anything, running, riding bikes, jogging, playing basketball, playing baseball, but and being grateful for everything that you have, and always know that life could be worse, and that is the most grateful thing, is knowing that even though you may not be where you want to be, I may not be where I want to be, that life could be worse. I know it can. And so hopefully these conversations will help other people open up, or will help other people go see help, or help people understand that they're not the only ones struggling and going through it. There's other people struggling and going through it too. And then you could struggle and go through negativity and still do anything you can to turn that negativity into positivity by having those goals and by reading. It takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. You know what I mean? But the goal is to get better. I'm doing my best to get better. And I hope if you have an addiction, or if you know somebody who has an addiction, I want you to get better. I hope you're doing what you need to get better. Or at least helping your friend or your family or whoever it is, helping them to get better. I know sometimes people hide their addiction, or they say, oh, there's nothing wrong. Man, just give that person a hug every time you see them. It's amazing what a hug will do. Even if they don't want to admit the fact that they have an addiction, which you think is possible, give that person a hug. Tell them you love them. Man, take them out to eat, or go on a walk with them, go on a bike ride with them, play a game of basketball with them. You know what I'm saying? Just show them you love them, man. Because they may be grieving, they may be lonely, they may be mad that they can't change their situation. They may be mad that they haven't been the parent that they wanted to be. They may be mad that the job they work for sucks. You know what I mean? And as long as they know if they got this one person who's going to just come and play basketball with them, that might change everything. They got one person who will sit there and let them rant and rave about everything. That might change everything. It's just those small things that help. You know, be there for a friend with addiction. Be there for a family member with addiction. If you have an addiction, do everything you can to be there for yourself. I hope you guys use this to open up and to help someone or to help yourself. Please, y'all, we got to get better. You know, I'm not perfect. I'm not a counselor. You know, I'm not an expert. I'm a man that knows what addiction is because I've been through it and I've seen other people go through it. And that it sucks for me when I was going through it. And it sucked for those other people when they were going through it. So I just want to help as much as I can, even if it's just by saying I had an addiction myself. I still struggle with alcoholism and I'm doing my best to get better. I'm still writing books. I'm still doing my best to create merchandise and seasonings and food videos, but I'm not perfect. And I'm doing what I can to make myself better. And I hope you are too. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you next time. I'll see you next time here on the channel. Turning negativity into positivity. I'm Chris Dixon. Love, peace, and fish grease.